Hello, everyone, and good morning or good night. Welcome to attend Professor Sergei Artemov's lecture on logic and foundation of mathematics at the Wuhan University. Okay, it's our great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Sergei Artemov. Sergei Artemov is a famous logician working on logic and its applications. He currently holds the title of Distinguished Professor in Computer Science, Mathematics, and Philosophy at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, where he is the founder and head of its research laboratory for logic and computation. His research interests include proof theory and logic in computer science, optimal control, and hybrid systems, automated deduction and verification, epistemology, and epistemic game theory. He is best known for his invention of logics of proofs and justifications. During the lecture, the audience are welcome to propose your question, if any, in the chat box. The staff at Xueshu will forward your questions to us. Then Professor Sergei Artemov will give his replies. Also, we thank the technical support of Xueshu which broadcast this lecture. Now it's our time for Professor Sergei Artemov's lecture. From Gödel's second increase theorem is a widespread belief that there is no consistent proof in the there is no proof of consistent of formal system in this formal system itself. In this lecture, Professor Sergei Artemov will debunk this myth. Okay, now let's welcome Professor Sergei Artemov to give his lecture. The title is The Probability of Consistency, Debunking the Myth. Okay, welcome.
We refute the widespread belief that there exists no consistency proof of a given system that can be formalized in that system itself. We prove the consistency of Peano Arithmetic as a test case. In its original formulation, no PA derivation proof 0 equals 1, and formalize this proof in Peano Arithmetic. Of course, you cannot do this without comparing what you do with the famous Gödel second incompleteness theorem and limitations it poses to this kind of reasoning. Gödel's second incompleteness theorem states that Peano Arithmetic cannot derive the formula.
Sergei,
Yes.
I'm afraid we're not seeing your screen.
In the shared abstract, we refute the widespread belief there exists no consistent proof of a given system that can be formalized in that system itself. And as a test case, we prove the consistency of Peano Arithmetic PA in its original formulation, no derivation in PA proves 0 equals 1, and formalize this proof in Peano Arithmetic. G2, which is the second incompleteness theorem, states that Peano cannot derive the consistency formula, which ConPA, which is the well-known internalized version of the consistency property. Our proof does not yield a PA derivation of ConPA. So at the end of the day, we're proving something else. It's not the formula, and hence does not contradict G2. And we'll explain exactly why and how this happens. This also points toward a class of formalizable mathematical proofs not yet studied in logic. So this is the result of a much deeper observation than just about probability of some specific property. We also argue that the probability of self-consistency is a widespread property of theories containing arithmetic. It's not just an isolated case. Hilbert consistency initiatives. Hilbert's second problem from his famous list of 1900 and Hilbert's program developed later, initiated studies of the class of problems, which we call here for short HST. These problems are parameterized by two theories. We regard them as formal theories. establish consistency of a formal theory T by means of theory, or S by means of theory T. And I skip all the historical, all the history of the extremely rich history of these studies. Just go to the heart of the matter directly. In the case S equals PA, which is the theory of interest, for today mainly will be Peano Arithmetic, though we'll cover many other theories too. The accepted answer has been for decades, H PA has a negative solution. Basically, it means that Peano cannot prove its consistency by means formalizable in theory itself. What if you lose a little bit the external theory, the theory which we use as means to prove consistency of PA? So it means H PAT. This problem has affirmative solutions for some T's barely outside Peano. There's a famous result by Gensen and Gödel. There are others too. Our findings show that this well-known answer is wrong in clause A. Among others, this dismantles the foundational impossibility paradigm. And this is a direct quote from Encyclopedia Britannica article Metalogic, which was last revised in 2000. There exists no consistency proof of a system that can be formalized in the system itself. Of course, with all the caveats about what we mean by a system. So at the end of the day, I hope that Encyclopedia Britannica might consider revising this particular article at least once more. Oops. So Gödel's second incompleteness theorem, let me see. Yes. Gödel's second incompleteness theorem, G2 states that the arithmetical formula ConPA, as we mentioned in the abstract, believed to formalize the consistency property of PA, is not derivable in PA, given that PA itself is consistent, of course. That's the usual assumption. Yes. Together with the widely accepted formalization principle, which we called here FP, we'll discuss it many times, claiming loosely that any rigorous reasoning, mathematically rigorous reasoning within the postulates of Peano Arithmetic can be formalized as a derivation in Peano Arithmetic. We just formulated FP with respect to Peano Arithmetic. And these things together appear to suggest that HPA-PA is impossible. It's the standard method reasoning, or standard interpretation of Gödel's second incompleteness theory. The bird's eye view here. So the popular wisdom has believed for many years that G2 plus formalization principle yields HPA-PA is impossible. So it's impossible to prove Peano consistency by means of Peano. In this work, we offer a positive solution by presenting a proof of the consistency and formalizing this proof in Peano. And the question remains, what went wrong with one? And I trust that no sane logician will continue listening this kind of talk without having a satisfactory answer to this question. And I hope that in this slide, within 20 seconds, I will give you some outline of this satisfactory answer to this question. So first of all, the bullet number one, G2 from this equation is actually a proven mathematical fact. There is no doubts. There are no doubts about that, at least within this talk. We also do not question formalization principle. It's a useful proof-theoretical analog of Church's thesis. And we'll use it when convenient to cut technicalities which do not influence the answer. The problem here in the line one is actually with arrow. We show that the standard proof of one tacitly uses a stronger and eventually false version of formalization principle. This happens. You formulate a nice principle which looks quite acceptable but then we'll begin using it. You use some dirty tricks which do not fit into the in the assumptions made. How does our proof circumvent the restrictions of G2? So again, G2 only states that Peano arithmetic cannot derive the specific arithmetical formula, ConPA, believed to encode the consistency of Peano arithmetic. While this is often taken to be the only route by which one might prove consistency of PA, we show that it is not. Instead, our proof works directly with the mathematical definition of PA consistency due to Hilbert himself, rather than with its encoding as ConPA. So in this respect, we're making a big leap, big step towards the origin of the whole story. So we work with a mathematical definition of Peano before all this coding and encoding happened and was applied. So the principal conceptual contribution of this paper is identifying a new class of mathematical proofs. We call them selector proofs, which, despite being widely used in mathematical practice, were actually left outside the scope of traditional proof theory. We present a selector proof of PA consistency and formalize it in PA. The resulting formalization is not a PA derivation of ConPA, and that's how we circumvent the restrictions of G2. This talk has 3 sections. The preliminary section, we show that the popular wisdom concerning G2 is poorly founded. Mathematical, we outline the solution of HPA-PA, the positive solution. Namely, we'll do a very usual mathematical reasoning for any PA derivation D. So there'll be a parameter of our reasoning. We construct a PA definable invariant I of D, or I subscript D, and establish an arithmetic that for each phi in D, I of phi holds. I of 0 equals 1 doesn't hold. And hence this invariant actually distinguishes formulas in D from 0 equals 1, which hence does not occur in D. This is also quite usual trick in this part of logic 2, but of course it has never been used for these particular purposes before. And then section number 3, foundational. We generalize this consistency proof and embed it into the current foundational studies. We try other theories and we'll see how far we can go with this one. Mathematical context, Peano arithmetic. Well, I expect a quite different audience, so I'll just briefly. Peano arithmetic is a first order theory containing 0 as a constant, individual constant function, successor plus times, and the usual recursive identities for these functions. Numerals are terms, 0 with a successor applied to them as many times as we wish. And PA also contains induction principle. For each formula phi of 0 and for all x, phi of x implies phi of x prime, yields for all x, phi of x, which is the usual formulation of induction principle. This principle is the one which makes Peano arithmetic infinitely axiomatizable. There are infinitely many in the top of logical first order logical schemes. There are infinitely many specific axioms, namely induction axioms. I'm afraid that somebody's mic is not muted. I see some background noise.
Okay, we will deal with that and mute some.
Okay. You can do it just looking at the list of participants. And you just check the mics Some of them are not crossed. In addition to yours and mine, of course. So if they're not crossed, you cross them. You just click on them and it will be crossed. Hello? There's some music on there. And it sounds Chinese, so I'm sorry. It's not mine then.
So we are stop doing with this. I think
It's
you
Louise.
can forget, someone forget to mute his audio. Yeah.
Louise is not muted. There we go.
Good. So the notational conventions, proof X, Y, this is the proof predicate of Peano arithmetic. It's a standard primitive recursive proof predicate, which we denote, since we'll be using it a lot, we'll denote it for short by just the column, X colon Y. This is our short notation for proof XY. And it describes the behavior of proof predicate. P is a PA proof of phi, if and only if the Gödel number of P column Gödel number of phi. This may be regarded as a specific description of the functional description of the proof predicate. We then omit sharp when safe and write it simply P is a Peano proof of phi, if and only if P column phi. This is our, so we abuse notation. We just put the proof in the formula in the place which was reserved for numeric variables or numeric terms. But this is according to our convention, this should work. Furthermore, the probability predicate provable Y is the application as a result of applying formal existential quantifier to the proof predicate. There exists X colon Y. And finally, the PA consistency formula ConPA is the formula not provable 0 equals 1, or equivalently for all X is not a proof of 0 equals 1. This is a standard definition of the consistency formula. There are plenty of others, mostly probably equivalent to this one. This is probably the shortest. Now, the first, hopefully non-trivial observation, the strict formalization principle. The impossibility conclusion 1, you remember this one, tacitly uses not the familiar formalization principle of P. Any rigorous reasoning within the postulates of Peano arithmetic can be formalized as a derivation in PA, but rather the strict formalization principle, SFP, which, since I'm formulating it, I am taking all the blame for this, for the formulation. Suppose a property P is formalized as a PA formula, F of P, or F subscript P. Then any arithmetical proof of P yields a PA derivation of F of P. This is how this formalization principle was used in this reasoning about impossibility paradigm. We have the a priori formalization of consistency as ConPA, and then we claim that any consistency proof should result in a formal derivation of this particular consistency formula, which actually went quite a long way, and we see how long this way was, from the original definition of consistency. So the strong formalization principle actually requires two inputs. The formalization of a property P as an arithmetical formula, FP, and an informal arithmetical proof of P. And SFP promises a formalization of 2, this informal arithmetical proof of P, which is a PA derivation of F of P. when we parse it this way, but it's exactly how this formalization principle was used, then it really looks quite suspicious. If SFP doesn't appear justified, because just from the top of my head, some mathematical proofs of P may be incompatible with an a priori choice of the formalization f of P. So this is clearly quite suspicious. Of course, we'll show this strong strict formalization principle false. Another observation, but this one was actually made by some people early on, several decades ago, but I couldn't find any mileage made out of this observation. However, this is a very revealing foundational observation. The PA consistency definition, no finite sequence of formulas is a PA derivation of 0 equals 1, is a mathematical statement about syntactic objects, finite sequences. It says nothing about Gödel numbers. It says nothing about standard, non-standard elements of arbitrary models of Peano arithmetic. It says just a mathematical combinatorial statement, mathematical statement about very clearly defined syntactic objects, namely finite sequences of formulas. So the approach internalized consistency as a PA sentence, like ConPA, and establish its probability in PA, taken as a serious attempt to prove consistency, is actually a failure from the beginning, because we cannot establish the consistency of PA since an inconsistent theory vacuously proves anything. So imagine that this test, instead of yielding a negative result, according to Gödel, G2, would yield a positive result. So imagine that Peano is able to prove consistency of PA, or some other single formula, arithmetical formula, which we believe fairly represents the consistency. But we cannot claim that we prove the consistency of Peano arithmetic, because if Peano arithmetic is itself inconsistent, then this would be vacuously true. So a way to prove the consistency of Peano arithmetic by means of Peano arithmetic would be the correct, or foundationally correct way, would be to find a mathematical proof of PA consistency. Just informal, solid, good old mathematical proof, presumably of combinatorial character, but we're not limiting ourselves. Do whatever you're pleased to do, try to proving consistency of Peano arithmetic, and then formalize this proof in Peano arithmetic. So there are two-stage approach. The mathematical proof, satisfying all requirements for the rigorous mathematical proof. And then it's formalization in Peano arithmetic. And this is exactly what we'll be doing. And that's why we hope to produce a convincing proof of consistency of Peano arithmetic, and convincing formalization of this proof in Peano arithmetic. Okay, now we'll play with examples. This is my favorite part, because for a bright and smart audience, good examples speaks for themselves, and they tell you the whole story. And the formal reasoning on the top is very often just redundant. But we start with the good examples. Consistency proof via the standard model, but it's a very slow start, don't worry. No PA derivation D contains 0 equals 1. That's the claim. And here's the proof, very short one. Take omega, the standard model of arithmetic, which domain of the carrier is 0, elements are 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever numbers or whatever character you wish, but it's standard model. With the usual operations, successor plus and times for natural numbers. And let D be derivation in Peano arithmetic, then all formulas in D are true in omega. True. In the usual mathematical sense. Base case, axioms of Peano and logical postulates is secured because they're all true in these things. And the recursive definitions are true because they're by the definition of the standard model. And since it's a well-founded domain, the induction, all instances of induction schema are also true in the model. So in the induction step, all logical rules in D are truth preserving. So if you start with something which is true in the model and you apply mode exponents, you end up with something which is also true in the model, and you keep going until you reach the end of D, and which concludes then everything which D derives is true in the model. But since 0 equals 1 is not true, it cannot occur in D. Well, it's a cheap reasoning, which basically it's a very easy special case that if a set of first order formula has a model, then it's consistent. But here we use the standard model of arithmetic. Though convincing, this is not a proof by means of Peano arithmetic because it uses the notions true in the standard model, true in the model, or the notion true in the standard model, which is not itself expressible in Peano arithmetic. This is a well-known observation. Now it's becoming more interesting, though also a quite slow acceleration. So example number 1, the complete induction principle CI for any formula psi, and we're talking about the arithmetical formulas, if for all x, for all y less than x, psi of y implies psi of x, then for all x, psi of x. So instead of securing just one step, we refer not the previous step in the ladder of numbers, but in all previous steps. This is a well-known principle of complete induction, basically studied in advanced or the math club in high school math clubs and everywhere else. So question number 1, is complete induction for Peano is provable? Oh, yes, of course. And the mathematical answer is yes, and this is a textbook proof of CI. So it shows that it's not the case that these evil and twisted logicians try to invent something to fool the world. The friends of paradoxes, they try to paradox everything. No, this is a good old mathematics. It's present in the textbook and zillions of textbooks in elementary number theory, or in a textbook in elementary mathematics for high school level. So here's the textbook proof of CI. Take an arbitrary psi and apply the usual PA induction to phi, which is an auxiliary formula built just to make an argument, psi of x, which is for all y less than x, psi of y, and get the PA statement by an easy logical reasoning. We'll get exactly the Peano or the reasoning in Peano. We'll get the PI statement, the complete induction statement, CI psi for this particular psi, the origin psi. So this is a well-known proof. And question number 2, is this proof formalizable in Peano arithmetic?
So Sergei,
yes.
What you're really saying here is that each instance of the induction schema is provable in PA.
We'll discuss it exactly. Yes, this is instance. Yes, but actually we're proving more.
So complete induction is not actually a sentence in PA. So
exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yes. It's the next slide. You're stealing my next slide.
Okay.
No, that's fine. So the answer is yes. It's a proof formalizable in Peano arithmetic as is. And this is well. Thank you, Carl. You're a brilliant professor. Because what you did, you paved the way for me to make the good entrance with this particular remark. I pay attention that despite the fact that complete induction is not formalizable as a one sentence of Peano arithmetic, we can formalize this proof as a one single sentence. Because look what this proof does. This proof selects an individual derivation for each instance of CI, exactly as Carl just noticed. This process is easily formalizable in PA by presenting a selector function, which is a primitive recursive selection, and you can easily describe how it works. It's a term which, given Gödel number of psi, computes the code of the derivation PA of complete induction corresponding to this psi. Just look at this auxiliary phi and apply induction, and you'll get, there are 5-6 lines, and you'll get the proof of Ci of psi. And of course, it's completely constructive and it's very primitive recursive. Given Gödel number of psi, you get the Gödel number of the code of the derivation of Ci of psi and PA. And the proof in Peano that C of x, the selector function, works as at all inputs. Well, first of all, S of x was total because it's primitive recursive. That's why I like primitive recursive. It's a rich class which is automatically total, and we don't have to prove the totality. And when you prove in totality or then you have to really watch your back, because you can sneak in some consistency assumption or this kind of, or other assumptions which are equivalent to consistency or something. You don't want to do this. So that's why it's primitive recursive selector. But my claim as the proof that C of S of x works for all inputs is as simple, that's so simple, then Peano proves that it always does the job. It's a purely combinatorial statement. Peano is able to prove that for all x, S of x, so the result of the thing, we just handle Gödel numbers, and we'll get the Gödel numbers, and the new Gödel numbers, S of x, is indeed a derivation of the Gödel number of complete induction corresponding to this x. And this is actually quite easy observation because it's a very easy fact. And if you look at the definition, if you're careful, minimally careful in defining the primitive recursive scheme for S of x, that's what you'll get by just doing the usual inductive reasoning. And also, if you just use your logicians or mathematicians or computer scientists or philosopher intuition of reasoning inside theory, we can reason inside Peano arithmetic. And it's such an easy combinatorial fact that, of course, we prove this. And this is my answer to you, Carl. We're doing much more than the first bullet or the instant proof of complete induction. We prove that it works uniformly. And this is a real complete embedding, complete formalization in Peano. After these bullets, number 1 and 2, I claim that we can really claim, and this is what mathematicians do when they apply this, they claim that the complete induction is actually provable in Peano. And they do it all the way. And that's what they mean. Of course it's provable because Peano can prove anything you wish about the thing. What is a selector proof in general? Imagine a property P with a syntactic parameter U such that for each U, P of U is an arithmetical formula. P of U may be a formula, a term, or a numeral, or something of this kind. So it's not necessarily has a dimension or the type of natural numbers. Carl, type, that's about your domain, yes, types. Yes, P of U, it's an arithmetical, but the only thing which we want, we say that this, okay. That P of U is an arithmetical formula for each specific U from domain. We ask an actual mathematical question whether P is provable by means of Peano arithmetic. How could we answer this? And mathematicians kept answering this question again, and again. And we'll see that within 3 or 4 slides, we'll see that there are this kind of selector proofs, there are everywhere. You cannot make a step in mathematics without this kind of proofs. We just didn't notice this. So the aforementioned classical proof of complete induction points at a widely accepted mathematical way to answer this too. We find a selector procedure which, given U, builds a Peano proof of P of U. And we make sure that Peano proves the totality and correctness of this procedure. This is for natural formalization of selector as PA. For example, we pick a natural formalization of the selector as a Peano PA term. And the natural, the term for Gödel numbers of X. And then we establish that Peano proves that for all inputs X, which encodes all possible parameters for P of X, we just convert everything into numbers. Instead of P of U, we consider P dot X, which says the same thing as P of U, but with Gödel numbers. To say this, we say that, for example, and this is the identity which governs the whole thing, P dot Gödel number of U is equal to Gödel number of P of U. So that's exactly what Peano says, what we want to prove. We say that Peano proves for all X, S of X is a proof of P of X. So Peano proves that this selection procedure, selector procedure, always works and always produces the result. And the claim is that for I'm going to convince you with the body of examples, then for the working mathematician, this is a good enough answer to whether P is provable or not. If you're facing a bunch of P of U's corresponding to different U's, and you ask whether they all hold, whether they can be justified in theory T, well, what you do, it's not good enough to say, well, by some very abstract reasons, because of in set theory, some big cardinal doesn't like another big cardinal, then this happens. They're always provable in Peano arithmetic.
Right.
It's not good enough.
So what you're doing is the schema, as opposed, instead of proving for all U, P of U, you have this set of schemas that
exactly, and this is exactly what selector proofs are all about. Mathematicians consider this as a solid textbook proof. For them, it's a good answer, good enough. For logician, maybe we have to do more. We have to check that the selector really works uniformly. Because in simple case, it's intuitive. Clearly, the selector is so simple, then it's quite clear that it works, and it works intuitively for all inputs. But if in a general case, we have to prove this, to check this. And this is the way to prove the variety of P of U's. So the property P of U, without formalizing this property as a single formula. Let me try to do, strangely enough. Oh. Yep. And this way, by the way, we accept the desired proof of complete induction for PA. It's provable because we prove its uniformly. But we do not accept the standard model proof of Peano because we cannot find the selector, or if we find the selector, we cannot formalize it inside Peano because it uses some arguments which are outside the scope of Peano arithmetic. And again, P of U is not a single arithmetical formula. It may be the bunch of arithmetical formulas, a scheme, as Carl mentioned. But the proof that it works, nevertheless, we have a solid formalization by a single formula in Peano that this scheme is provable. And I claim that mathematicians are quite okay with things. They do it always. So mathematicians do it. I give an example, complete induction. There are zillions of others. I'll give you more examples because I want to convince you that you logicians or us logicians do it all the time too, without acknowledging it properly. We'll stay a little bit longer in the mathematical world. The product of two polynomials is a polynomial. Is it provable in Peano arithmetic? Well, the answer is of course it is. This is one of the basic and very simple property of terms, specifically polynomials in the standard form. Polynomials is sum of monomials. Mathematical proof, given polynomials f and g, we calculate coefficients of their product h. There are special formulas for calculating the coefficients of h from coefficients for a and f and g. And we prove in arithmetic, we derive, there's a derivation that f times g is indeed h. They're not syntactically equal. They are equal in arithmetic. Equal in arithmetic means arithmetic derives the corresponding equality. Hence, to state this equality, we have to produce a derivation. And guess what? This derivation actually depends on f, g, and h. They're quite uniform. That's why we make it, it's a selector proof. But the point is that it is a selector proof. Somewhere inside, there is a derivation which corresponds to the specific instances of f, g, and h. I hope you see it now. So for each f, g, it finds a Peano proof, then f times g equals h. This is a selector proof. What's a selector here? Well, since Peano doesn't have quantifiers over terms, to formalize this proof in Peano, we have to use Gödel numbers. It's the standard approach here. So we just define the Peano, the primitive recursive term product dot xy, such that the product of taking Gödel number f and g, this term returns the Gödel number of this equality. It's a formal equality f times g equals h in the language of Peano arithmetic. For h, which is calculated by formulas from the product of polynomials f and g. So h depends on f and g. So the whole thing actually depends on f and g. It takes two Gödel numbers and returns one Gödel number. And the natural PR term, primitive recursive term selector, s, x, and y, such that given two inputs, Gödel number of f, Gödel number of g, it returns the Gödel number of PA-derivation f of f times g equals h. It calculates this Peano proof, which we considered. By the direct formalization of the above reasoning, Peano proves that it's so simple that Peano clearly proves that it's for each x and y. The selector on x and y returns the proof, Peano proof of the product dot x and y. So this is selector proof, and this is its formalization in Peano. Are we getting closer to believing the selector proofs are ubiquitous? Here's for logicians, both or just mathematical, philosophical, computer scientists. Take the De Morgan laws, and it's just, I pick the one. Almost any other tautologist will do too. Parameterized by formulas x and y, sorry. It's a classical De Morgan's law. The negation of conjunction is equivalent to disjunction of negations. Is the De Morgan's law provable in arithmetic? If you ask a logician that he say this, are you laughing at me? You kidding me? Of course it is. It's a propositional law. The Peano arithmetic is a first order theory. Of course it does everything which the propositional logic can do. But let's look closely. For given x and y, we find the standard logical derivation g depending on x and y of this identity in Peano arithmetic. But guess what? This derivation is different for different x and y's. It depends on x and y. There is no one big derivation which derives the whole thing for any x and y. First of all, because x and y, they're not numerical variables. They are variables ranging over metavariables. They're ranging over formulas, itself Peano arithmetic. So this is a typical scheme with the parameters x and y, with the formula parameters in Peano arithmetic. So the standard proof, which I just quoted, is a selector proof, which builds an individual PA derivation for each instance of De Morgan's law. Of course, it can be easily formalized in Peano as a derivation, this very easy selector function. It takes x and y and builds by the well-known recipe, looking at the propositional derivation, builds the corresponding PA derivation, and which is clearly the Peano proof of the corresponding identity, De Morgan's identity. And this reasoning is so simple and so uninvolved that Peano, of course, can derive this, that it works uniformly. That's why, by the way, the answer to logicians to whether De Morgan's law are derivable in Peano arithmetic is, of course, stupid. Of course it's derivable, because it is a selector proof. And this selector is simple, so simple that Peano can prove anything we need to know about. That's why I have a proof that the De Morgan's law is actually derivable in Peano. Logicians. Iterated consistency. When I share it with my friends, one of them, Moshe Vardi, a prominent computer scientist, asked, it was there in 2021, a year ago, what was wrong with the following consistency proof? I just number it, example 4. Consider the sequence of theories. PA0, which is PA itself, PAI plus 1 is PAI plus consistency formula for PAI. Each PAI in this sequence is actually a recursively enumerable theory, and we can construct the consistency formula for PAI in the standard fashion. It says for all x, x is not a derivation of PAI of 0 equals 1. And we take the limit theory, the union of all PAIs corresponding to i's standard natural numbers I, PAI, union of all these things. The claim, we try to prove the consistency of PA omega by means of PA omega as follows. Moshe Vardi, a computer scientist. He is also a prominent logician, but he's first of all a very prominent computer scientist. Let D, we take an arbitrary derivation in P omega. And this is a finite sequence of formulas arranged in a certain manner. And let N be the largest index of ConPAs occurring in D. Among the finite set, of course, we just find the largest inside the finite set. Then D is a derivation in PA with index n plus 1 because it's cumulative. It contains all the axioms of PAIs with the indices less than n, less or equal than n. And ConPA n plus 1 is one of the postulates in PA, implies that G doesn't contain 0 equals 1. So one big axiom, which proves in Peano arithmetic actually that all formulas, that D is consistent, because ConPA n plus 1 asserts consistency, uniform consistency for all derivations in PA n plus 1. And this D is a specific derivation in n plus 1. Hence, D is consistent, so it doesn't contain 0 equals to 1. If you just understand the definition of ConPA, PN plus PIs, and a little bit of first order logic, then you agree that this is an absolutely correct reasoning. So of course it is a proof. But it is a selector proof because it doesn't the consistency, it proves consistency for each D, for each derivation D, it provides a separate proof of consistency. But in an absolutely convincing and absolutely rigorous manner. That's how it works. So there's a consistency proof of PA by means of PA. Well, because it's a selector proof formalizable in PA by selector S of X, which given a derivation D computes the code of a derivation that D does not contain 0 equals 1. How does this selection work? Selector works. It operates with codes, with Gödel numbers. So it sees nothing but numbers. So it's a real primitive recursive function, or being shaped as a term, if you wish. It takes X, viewing it as a kind of D. It recovers, it calculates the maximum, the largest index PI. Of course, you can do it using the usual induction axioms. You don't need to refer to the finiteness, the standard model. You can always calculate the max by using the usual primitive recursive functions. So you don't need specific or standard model for this. And then it just easily converts. It finds the ConPA n+1 and easily converts the universal quantifier from this thing into a specific evaluation by D. And it gives you the PA omega proof that D doesn't contain 0 equals 1. And you provide this proof, the Gödel number of this proof, as an output of the selector function. Again, this reasoning is so simple, combinatorial reasoning. It doesn't go outside Peano arithmetic. It's just handling with numbers, with integers in a primitive recursive manner. All the quantifiers are also bounded there, this reasoning. So the resulting procedure S of X is primitive recursive. And it's so simple that Peano can prove that for all X, S of X is indeed Gödel number of omega proof that X is not a proof of 0 equals to 1. The 0 equals 1 doesn't occur in the derivation encoded by X. So the conclusion, this is indeed a consistency proof of PA omega by means of PA omega. But why I like this example very much, not because I like Moshe Vardi very much, and I admire his brilliance, but also because it provided us with a very good and clear example. Then this formalization of the consistency, this consistency proof, if you wish, this one, tree, is not a derivation of the consistency formula, because you can look at PA omega in the usual Gödel von Neumann style and build the standard consistency formula con PA omega using the probability predicate in PA omega. But what we build, it is a mathematical proof of consistency. It is formalizable in Peano arithmetic. But it is not a derivation of the consistency formula con PA omega. Already in this example, we managed to circumvent, to get around the limitations of Gödel's second incompleteness theorem, but with respect to PA omega, which you might regard as kind of artificial theory. But it's good enough as a good breaking point. Findings so far. So selector proofs are indispensable in mathematics for proving for all U, P of U, in which U is a syntactic parameter, terms, formulas, derivations, etc. P of U is an arithmetical formula for each U. Given U, such a proof constructively selects a PA derivation for each P of U. This is the character, this is how selector proofs work. For a working mathematician, this is a good enough justification that P of U holds. For all U, P of U holds. Because for each U, we can just provide the proof of it. Selector proofs from examples 1 and 4 are naturally formalizable in Peano arithmetic. Remember, complete induction, De Morgan's law, multiplying polynomials, and the Vardy's example. None of the examples 1 and 4 is covered by the strict formalization principle. In examples 1 and 3, a single formula presentation of the property P does not exist. In example 4, an a priori formula presentation of P as ConPA omega, that what is the well-educated logician would do automatically. Come with a ConPA, what is a consistent formula? It's formalizable, yes, this is a consistent formula, but it has nothing to do with the given selector proof of P. And by Gödel's theorem, ConPA omega is not provable in P omega. Of course not. But it did not prevent us from giving a selector proof of P or the consistency property. So it looks like some common and formalizable in PA, and very common. Mathematical arguments are not accounted for in the impossibility paradigm. Note that you cannot make a step in metamathematics without using selector proofs. More discussion. Discussion on selector proofs with the traditional logician. And all the questions are fair questions. And I encountered it many times discussing with logicians from all over the world. Logician asks, each of the examples 1 and 4 admits a straightforward formalization as an infinite series of finite PA derivations. So we're looking for infinitary proofs. Such infinitary proofs are not legitimate proof objects in Peano arithmetic. So we have to reject these proofs. They're not formalizable. Our response, this infinitary proofs observation does not rule out the finite formalization in Peano using a different approach, just work smarter. After all, many infinite, quote unquote, mathematical objects can be represented in Peano arithmetic in a finite form. For example, a function of natural numbers, any function, is an infinite set of pairs, if taken literally, input-output. Even if it's constant, you have infinitely many inputs. However, Peano represents primitive recursive functions in a finite form as definable terms and work with them normally. You can prove anything you wish about plus. And well, just anything you actually need about plus. Just looking at the recursive definition using induction. The same holds for, by the way, representing rational numbers as pairs of integers with some constraints. Because in such presentation, any rational number is an infinite object. But no, without the quotient sign, it's an infinite object actually. But with the quotient, it allows finite presentation. You can prove all the identities about rationals using this kind of progressive presentation without reducing to old-fashioned infinitary ways to representing rational numbers. But for the primitive recursive functions is also obvious. So selector proofs do not require new derivations in Peano arithmetic. We're not trying to extend Peano arithmetic. We try to carefully find something which it already harbors, which it already contains. We just have to recognize existing PA derivations of this kind is natural formalization of selector proofs for corresponding selectors S and properties P in Peano arithmetic. So infinitary proofs is not a limitation. We use the primitive recursive functions to represent potentially infinite objects in a smart way, in a finite form in Peano arithmetic. And as many times occurring, it occurred many times in the history of mathematics, it works nicely. Further discussion. Can we just say, okay, then Carl, this is a new, this is instance provable thing. Say for all u, P of u is provable Peano arithmetic, meaning that each instance of P of u is provable Peano arithmetic. So if this property is instance provable, and actually I agree with Carl, this is a current state of formalization of proofs of meta properties in Peano arithmetic, at least on the formal logicians level, and shame on us logicians. This state is quite unsatisfactory. Such simplistic reading ignores the question of why each instance of P of u is provable in Peano arithmetic. It says, because there may be some higher reasons. And that's why I started with the standard model proof of consistency. So without proper tools to answer this question, logic does not accommodate the mathematical practice which recognizes the usual proof of complete induction as a proof in arithmetic, but rejects the standard model proof of PA consistency as a proof in arithmetic, because consistency formulated with Gödel numbers as a scheme is, of course, instance provable. It satisfies this compromise definition of proving properties without formalizing them. However, this proof is not satisfactory. It cannot fit the bill, doesn't fit the bill of proving in arithmetic, because it uses to justify the instance probability, it uses argument which spills over the Peano arithmetic boundaries. So furthermore, with such approach, any true pi1 sentence becomes provable in Peano arithmetic which is highly counterintuitive. Of course, there should be many pi1 sentences which are not provable in arithmetic. And a logician with a little bit of experience feels it.
Right. See, yeah.
Yes.
So I don't see how L, in other words, if you have the adopt the principle that for all u provable of PU, that whole
Yes.
formula implies that it's provable. Yeah, that right. That doesn't give you that it's provable that for all.
Of course, it would pass the standard model proof, which is
right. But that's it.
Okay, good. And of course, I can give you more examples, but one good example is good enough. Further discussion. Okay, the logician becomes softer and more understanding. Okay, he just like Carl imitated the behavior of logician from this, he becomes more understanding. He say, okay, then for all u, P of u is provable Peano should mean Peano proves that each instance of P of u is provable in Peano. So the instance probability is not good enough. We have to have a uniform proof that it always works for all the inputs. This is a very good step towards selector proofs, but not good enough. I'll show you why. A possible approach to formalize this intuition, actually tried in 1960s, is to define for all u, P of u is provable in Peano as Peano proves that for all input x, there is y, there is a proof of this particular instance of P corresponding to x with the existential quantifier in there. Okay? I almost was able. Yeah. Good. I understand now. Okay, that's the existential quantifier. It is a dangerous object. because the proofs here are represented implicitly by existential quantifier. Intuitively, when you build a selector proof, you provide the algorithm, the method of giving the proof of P of X depending on X. But in this presentation, you lose this information and you replace the constructed selector, the proof constructed by existential quantifier. You replace the witness. You gave up the witness and replace it with existential quantifier, which is a first order quantifier. It's non-constructive. And of course you lose big actually, which is this using existential quantifier, the quantifier here is too weak, since the witness Y can be non-standard without a real definite derivation behind it. This makes phi dependent on consistency assumptions. Well, the insanity check is whether this definition actually yields, phi actually yields 4. Because if it doesn't, then 5 cannot work. Because we really have a very strong intuition that this thing, how the thing should work. And just to derive, what I say, without assuming so-called one consistency, which is just stronger than consistency, which yields consistency, we cannot even prove that 5 yields 4. So this existential quantifier doesn't work by several reasons. One, conceptual, because you replace implicit representation by witness, by giving up the real witness which you built. And then to recover from this loss, you have to pay the price. You have to assume what you want to prove. So just this definition doesn't work. Selector proofs avoid this deficiency. We represent this thing that exists Y by, in Scolim style, by explicit function of X, which says that, which means that we're back to selector function. Now, Y is S of X. That's what we do. We just breach this small, the gap, conceptual gap, which left from this compromised suggestion by L to our definition of selector proofs. So we end up saying that our criteria of formalization of selector proofs is Peano proofs for all X, S of X is a proof of P of X. This is, if you have this, then this is the selector proof, which is formalizable in Peano arithmetic. And this format actually secures a real Peano derivation S of M for each standard M. Oof, logician's dilemma. I'm really running young. As an organizer, you probably begin worrying this, but I'll try to wrap up, which is a shame. I'll just speed up. The logician's dilemma, because we're discussing really serious matters. Then there'll be some technical things, which I'll run more quickly. Logicians face a conceptual choice. Well, the choice is that we do not, so far, we do not have a proof theory of selector proofs. Moreover, logicians, they use this, the Hilbert definition of formalized proof, which is okay, but it's this is misused. It reads too narrow. Then we consider only the proofs of things which are formalizable, formalized as single arithmetical formulas. It's not good enough. We cannot make a move in mathematics. You cannot prove anything like the product of polynomials, tautologies, deduction theorem, whatever. Everything which is, this is the selector, actually selector proofs. And intuitively, we do these kind of things, which I suggest as the formalization things. So there are the conceptual choice. We do nothing and ignore selector proofs. Then we have to give up the claim that logic formalizes all of mathematical reasoning and to revise the mathematics.
Yeah, there is an alternative here, and that is, as I've discussed in my articles,
yes,
namely that you can, these other proofs like De Morgan's law, etc., are done in higher order logic, where you're not as limited as you are in first order logic. You can give the proofs there. So that is your alternative. if you want to formalize all mathematical reasoning. So you don't have to restrict yourself to first order logic.
Absolutely, but the foundationalist would have, it's a wonderful suggestion and very tempting. However, from the foundational point of view, the more powerful theory you take, the less it's a tradition which actually comes from Hilbert. The less reliable your assumptions are from the foundational point of view. I agree.
Of course,
the practical tool, it's perfect.
The type people have gone there. They haven't stayed in first.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. And this is where the strong support of, I call engineers or the computer scientists or the practitioners. Of course, that's the way to go. But we're doing this small foundational exercise. After all, whose doubts the consists of Peano arithmetic? I just gave you the proof of this.
Right, and also in these higher order systems, some of these higher order systems have using powerful principles like.
Absolutely, but again, Carl, I agree with you completely. But just let me finish this my small game, which is I try to check what kind of foundational assumptions I'm making. It's as ridiculous, maybe, or as funny as doing the ancient Greek problems like doubling the square, which is impossible by a rule or a compass. But this is a noble exercise. But of course, with the usual things, and especially using computer with any reasonable precision, you can double it. You can compute the square, the root, which has the third root of 2 easily. So of course, or just it's not the cube. Yes, it's square. Or the cube. Sorry, I just misspoke. But we're playing this small but very noble game. We try to sort out what's going on in foundations. This is a foundational talk. But as usual, a reasonable foundational work might have very good consequences. It can influence many other things. We'll discuss it later if I have a second. So imagine the choice number 1. This would compromise logic findings. So, for example, the impossibility of proving consistency paradigm, because it is clear that this approach leaves out almost all the mathematics which we automatically or assumed with the mother's milk is, of course, made by PA and formalizable there. Imagine the ensuing scandal should logicians admit openly that complete induction tautologies, product of polynomials, etc., are not provable in arithmetic. Strictly speaking, it's the case if you ignore selector proofs. Moreover, that consistency is unprovable for the same bureaucratic reason selector proofs are not included. To justify this one, I have to give you the selector proof of consistency, which we'll do. Or option number 2 is legitimize the use of selector proofs and their formalizations in PA. For example, the way I suggest doing this. Then we have to accept the selector proofs of PA consistency as well, because we cannot accept complete induction tautologies, products of polynomials, and just discriminate against consistency, which is the same cup of tea. This
So
will all,
this-
yeah.
Logician's dilemma is not the same thing as the mathematician's dilemma. The mathematician has another way out, namely these higher order logics, in which
Yep.
they can prove, complete induction, product of polynomials.
Yeah, sure.
They can even prove consistency, right?
Yeah, sure.
But they don't fit within the tradition. And so you can have to look at each one carefully to make sure that it's not committing nonsense by being a higher order logic. So I think there's a difference between where the logicians are here and where the computer scientists are. I think many of the computer scientists have just gone to the higher order logic, and then they have real proofs as opposed to selector proofs.
Well, they have real proofs because they just embrace all selector proofs well in advance. And it's the same selector proofs, but just shaped in the high order things, which is fine.
They don't need selector functions. They just do it directly.
Well, doing directly means you're you're using the powerful programmistic tool, which incorporates all the power of selector proofs. Anyway, I agree with you completely, but this is not quite relevant.
Selector proofs really don't count as valid in these higher order logics. They're not really proofs of formula.
Okay, Carl, dear, let me finish the talk because I'm running well over the time limits right now, and then we can discuss it. So the impossible road, and that's a road which logician tried for several decades, like 90 years, as we just noticed. By G2, it's impossible to prove the consistency of PA when we begin with the a priori formalization of consistency as ConPA. We take the PA consistency property, which is a combinatorial property in the first place. And then we do the a priori formalization of ConPA and then try to prove it in Peano. And what a pity we fail. And this is a famous Gödel in the completeness theorem. What we do, we take the different road, our road. We take PR consistency. We walk with this consistency combinatorial property. We provide its mathematical proof. And then we formalize it. It will be, at the end of the day, it will be the selector proof, as legitimate as other selector proofs of complete induction, product of polynomials, tautologies, or Vardy example. And then we formalize the whole thing as a uniform one statement in Peano Arithmetic. And this is our road. Okay, now very fast. The proof of consistency of PA goes by two consecutive steps. We describe the selector proof of Peano in its original form, no Peano derivation contains 0 equals 1, in the following way. For any given PA derivation D, we find a PA definable invariant I, specific for this particular D, and establish that I of phi holds for each phi from D, that means invariant, and I of D 0 equals 1 doesn't hold, and hence 0 equals 1 doesn't occur in D. And then we formalize the whole step 1 directly in PA in the usual manner. We formalize all selector proofs in there. We know that G2 prohibits having such invariant I uniformly for all derivations D, but having such a uniform, such invariant uniformly would amount to asking the Peano, a finite fragment of Peano, to prove the consistency of the whole Peano, which doesn't sound plausible at all. But okay. So very fast. The following is a mathematically rigorous proof of PI consistency. No PA derivation D contains 0 equals 1. And so what we do in the mathematics, there is a well-known construction called partial proof definitions. Namely, for each n, we build a primitive recursive way, a sigma n plus 1 formula, TR index n, truth n, which is called truth definition for sigma n formulas, which satisfy natural properties of truth predicate. And intuitively, for each sigma n formula, phi, and y is the sequence encoding the values of possible open parameters of phi, the true n of phi, y, defines the truth value of phi on y. And we can do it algorithmically and in a primitive recursive way given n. And for each n, just one truth definition formula. And the key property is the following Tarski condition, which holds and is provable in Peano arithmetic. Peano proves that phi of y is equivalent to truth n phi y. But phi is a Gödel number, of course. In particular, 0 equals 1 is false with respect to the truth predicate for any t, and this is provable in Peano arithmetic. And as a corollary for any axiom A of Peano of depth less or equal n, the quantifier depth, truth n A of y is provable, and truth n supports the rule of inference in Peano for formulas of depth length at n. And this is well-known classics in proof theory. Note that all proofs in proposition 1 and corollary are rigorous mathematical argument without any meta-mathematical assumptions. It's just pure syntax about PA. The formal language of PA is used here just for bookkeeping. And the proof of consistency, it's a very short proof given this machinery. Given a finite Peano derivation G, we calculate n, which is the Gödel number of code of G, and we can assume that all formulas from G have depth less or equal than D. Well, because the Gödel number is monotonic. So the number of quantifiers, total number of quantifiers less than total number of length of formula is less than length of the whole sequence where this formula occurs. So by induction up to length of G, and we check that any formula phi, the G is parameters Y, the property whole. It's immediate corollary over the Tarski's lemma. So the partial truth definition serves as invariant for formulas from G. By proposition 1, 0 equals 1 doesn't satisfy true n. Hence, it's not in D. And it's actually QED, the theorem 1. This is a consistency proof. And this is a solid and mathematically understandable selector proof of consistency, stating that for each G, we take an arbitrary G and we establish that 0 equals 1 doesn't occur in G. What else can a mathematician require from mathematical proof? So this is a mathematically rigorous selector proof of consists of PA, the type which occurred all over the mathematical reasoning, and use only principles of Peano arithmetic and some combinatorial reasoning easily formalizable in PA. So intuitively, this is a proof by means of Peano arithmetic. Now we check that this proof is indeed step-by-step formalizable in Peano arithmetic. And this is theorem 2, which might have raised some questions. However, the proof of theorem 1 is formalizable in Peano arithmetic. So at the end of the day, we have this thing naturally provable in Peano arithmetic. So we already described the selector several times, and I'll probably do it again. Here's a description of a primitive recursive selector as we're connecting a given n, viewed as a code of arbitrary PA derivation with the code of Peano proof S of n of not n. N is not a proof of 0 equals 1. All formulas from n have limited depth, bounded by n, and so this is a truth of n, or truths of n is invariant corresponding to n, and all quantifiers used in description of this in the procedure are bounded by obvious primitive recursive function of n, and the procedure is primitive recursive, and it's a syntactic walk with primitive recursive schemes, and with all the properties of these schemes are apparently provable in Peano arithmetic. And so for any input n, we have a Peano. So we have a Peano proof, also informal proof that given n returns that S of n is a proof that n is not a proof of 0 equals 1. By the formalization principle, I use it not for hiding something, but for cutting the tedious nonsense. Peano naturally proves that for all x, S of x proves that not x is a proof of 0 equals 1. This is a rather delicate formalization work, but there is nothing unusual for experienced logician working in this area, in this corner of logic for years and for decades. In my case, for 50 years already. Informal explanation, well, not time for this. I think that I already did. The summary of what happened. We asked the listener to answer 2 principal yes and no questions. First, does theorem 1, which is the consistent proof, a mathematically rigorous proof of PA consistency, no PA derivation contains 0 equals 1, assuming, of course, that all technical details work as described. And question number 2, does theorem 2, the formalization theorem, provide a formalization of the proof of theorem 1 in Peano, assuming that all technical details are correct? I'm not trying to push it through your throat and to force you to admit that this thing is correct. There are enough really great experts in the field which already checked all the details and certified the proof. We expect our listener to answer yes to both questions. And such a listener then agrees that this node delivers what it has promised, the mathematical proof of Peano consistency and the formalization of this proof in Peano. And just a little bit about foundational analysis. Young, I need maybe some 5 minutes. We started late with something slow. How far we can go with proving consistency of Peano arithmetic. And a simple but rather smart argument, which is attributed to Kurahashi of Japan and Sinclair of the United States at that time, the young faculty and young PhD student now, that Peano cannot Selector prove the consistency of a larger theory. It's a substantial larger theory. For example, theory T, which is Peano plus ConPA. So Peano cannot prove consistency of Peano plus ConPA by this particular method, but by some twisting and iteration of this method. This method actually opens the Pandora box. It breaks the wall. So, but if wall is broken, then who knows who's going to happen to the whole wall? Maybe it will, the hole will be widened to things. But so far, we cannot prove consistency of a larger theory using the smaller theory, which was the holy grail of all foundational Hilbert program from the beginning. Logician analysis, schemes in Peano arithmetic. I'll probably skip this. There is a small theory of proving schemes in Peano arithmetic, which compares the schemes with the corresponding formula. If they're both in arithmetical language, then provable with the provable selector is instant provable. When we don't prove the selector, that selector works in just the do instance, the easy instance provability of the property. And of course, provable is stronger than that one. But instance provable cannot give us the provable thing. I did it by hand waving, and this is a formal proof of this one. One more example, which is proof of a schema, which is not proof of consistency, but it's already too high up, more subtleties. Now the two last slides, self-consistency of extensions of Peano arithmetic. Let's look at the boldface. The proof immediately generalized all arithmetical RE extensions of T of each arithmetical extension T of Peano arithmetic proves self-consistency. So the self-consistency thing is not the feature of Peano arithmetic also only. Any theory extending Peano arithmetic is a subject of the same proof through the partial truth definitions. And it's actually quite easy to notice. You just apply the same story using the fact that in Peano arithmetic, each formula is equivalent, which is the Tarski property formula. Phi is equivalent to truth n of phi for a corresponding n. And this is sufficient to establish that self-consistency is a feature of all extensions of Peano arithmetic. What about big theories? Is mathematics able to prove its own consistency? I'm appealing to those who are coming from proof theory, and Young in particular. The selector proofs approach suggests an affirmative answer. And here's a sketch of the argument. Know that ZF, the set theory, is essentially reflexive. Namely, each theory T extending ZF, in particular ZFC, proves the standard consistency formula for each of its finite fragments phi. Without loss of generality, a finite fragment is just the finite bunch of formulas in the language from T. Where given phi, we constructively build the proof of con of phi consists of phi in T. And this is just an actual selector proof for consistency for any such T. Given derivation D of T, calculate the conjunction phi of all formulas in D and find a proof of con phi in T. This yields that T proves that D doesn't contain contradictions because given T, we can derive that 0 equals 1 is not part of T. And this proof is naturally formalizable in the F because of the constructive character of this main essentially reflexivity lemma. So this proof is naturally formalized in F, hence in T. However, I personally regard this proof formally correct, but essentially not very informative, though it's informative in one dimension. It's not informative in the other one. The mathematical value of such a consistency proof depends on how much trust we invest into T itself. What our selector proof approach eliminates is the limitations of proving self-consistency. T is able, in the old paradigm, T is not able to prove the consistency of itself. This is now eliminated. T can prove the consistency of itself, but it's not the case that the small theory, which we trust, Carl, that's about you too. We trust in primitive recursive arithmetic, or we trust in some finite fragment when everything is finite, no big assumptions. Can we use only this trusted core in foundations of mathematics and to prove the combinatorial consistency of larger theories like ZF? This is still wide open, but it's no longer impossible. Just let me finish because I don't have time, Carl, and then, okay. Please.
Sometimes you can give a model for T. You can construct a model of T to prove the consistency of T as opposed to going this route.
So, so the roadblock on like GT named after Gödel is removed from on the way of Hilbert progress of proving consistency of formalism by means of trusted core. But these developments resonate with some Gödel's foundation thoughts. And the Gödel once on the record actually said that very much alive, the Hilbert problem was very much alive and even more interesting than it initially was. And here's the quote. In the summary, our result eliminates the reflection tower when established consists of arithmetic with the arithmetic of Peano arithmetic. Moreover, we can envision a new form of the foundations. A sufficiently rich theory can formally establish self-consistency. That's what we're looking at in the foundations now. That's it. Thanks to the people. And I'm almost in time, Jan. Actually in time if you take into account the late beginning. Yes.
Never mind. Yeah, the last part you're a bit quick, but anyway, oh, okay. So this is first thank the speaker for this very interesting and insightful lecture. And in the following our discussion and question time, and the speaker suggests me to do a bit interlocutor work. So. Firstly, I have a few slides to share. Yeah. Could I share mine?
Your slides or my slides?
I have a few slides, my slide to share.
Oh, your own slides. Okay.
Yeah.
I will just stop sharing. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll first give a brief summary of Professor Artemov's lecture, also some minor comments or questions. Yeah, there are two widespread beliefs about Gödel's second complete theorem. One is that G refute Hilbert's program. The second is that there exists no consistent, there is no consistent proof of the base system in this system itself. And for the first belief, there are some objections from some scholars in the literature. In fact, neither Hilbert nor Gödel thinks that G2 refute Hilbert's program. Okay, and for Gödel, definitely he said that his G2 does not undermines Hilbert's program. For this part, there is some discussion in the literature. And for this talk, Professor Sergei Artemov is focused on the second widespread belief, which claims that it is possible to have a consistent proof of the formal system in this system itself. Okay, I think this is a great conceptual advancement for our understanding of G2. Yeah, for Hilbert saying that G2 only shows that one must exploit the finite standpoint in a sharper way for the consistent proof. And the Gödel thinks that it's conceivable that there exists a finite proof that cannot be expressed in the formalism of the base system. In this talk, Professor Artemov strongly refuted the popular belief too. He gave a mathematical proof of PA consistency and then shows that this proof is formalizable in PA. Professor Artemov expressed the consistency of PA in informal arithmetic and denoted by IA, which is the informal analog of PA. He expressed the consistent statement in IA as the following, which says that no finite sequence of formulas is a PA derivation of 0 equal 1. We denote this statement as exist ConPA. Exist ConPA is a natural and concrete mathematical statement about a finite syntactic objects for me, but it is not an arithmetical formula. Artemov's argument is done in two steps. Firstly, he shows that we can prove an extant ConPA in IA, informal arithmetic. This proof is mathematically rigorous, and the key tool he used is partial truth definition. Secondly, he shows that the proof in the first step is formalizable in PA. To show this, he used one key technique, the technique of selector proof. Also, he heavily used the formalization principle in the last line of the second step. This formalization principle claims that any rigorous reasoning within the postulates of PA can be formalized as a derivation in PA. It's amazing that the omega rule steps outside PA, but the selector proof step inside PA. Professor Artemov shows that there's a primitive recursive selector function, Sx, such that PA proves that for any n, Sn is the code of a proof that n is not a proof of 0 equal 1. Then using FP, we get that PA proves this one. You see, this is this is a universal quantifier sentence. We denote this sentence by int ConPA. Gödel's consistent statement is this one. You see that for any x is not the code of the proof of 0 equal 1. Professor Artemov's argument shows that IA cannot prove for each n is not a proof of 0 equal 1, but IA can prove that for each n, Sn is the code of a proof that n is not a proof of 0 equal 1. ConPA is not provable in PA. This is by Gödel's G2, but extend ConPA is provable in IA, and in the ConPA is provable in PA. So this work for me is an amazing conceptual advancement and challenges the dogma that there exists no consistent proof of a system that can be formalized in the system itself. in the forum is some minor comment. Okay, if Professor Artemov, you don't agree with me, and then you can point out and I mean, now let's compare his work with Gödel's G2. This work does not contradict Gödel's G2. The proof of in the ConPA in PA is not a proof of ConPA in PA. Second, G2 does not show that PA is consistent, but G2 enforces our confidence in the consistency of PA. This is my personal view. However, the fact that IA proves X ConPA does not give us more confidence in the consistency of IA, even if many people, in fact, including me, believe in the consistency of IA in formal arithmetic. Third, Gödel does a priori formalization of the consistent property, and Artemov does a priori formalization. Gödel used a single formula to formalize consistent, but Artemov used a proof scheme instead. Finally, from Gödel's root, any RE extension T of a PA cannot prove the consistent of T, and it leaves the room for the ordinary analysis. From Artemov's root, any RE extension T of a PA proves this consistency. And finally, just some minor questions. Artemov's proof is purely based on formalization principle. For him, FP is the probability analog of Church's thesis, and the acceptance of FP is based on a product of experience. So is that we cannot prove this principle, and we can only accept it based on our intuition. If so, why some people have strong intuition on FP, like Artemov, but others, maybe beginner student don't. So maybe one explanation is that this intuition is not involved, but based on our experience. Second, there are different ways to experience consistent in the literature. An important question is, what is a proper consistent statement? X ConPA is much more natural and concrete than ConPA in the sense of Hilbert's concrete proof theorem. But what about in the ConPA, the formal counterpart of X ConPA? Do you think that it is also very natural and concrete? Finally, Hilbert's program looks for a finite proof of consistency of PA in PA. Is Artemov's proof just the missing proof Hilbert expected? Finally, a minor question is that how about is informal arithmetic stronger than PA? Also, I'm sorry that I'm missing my slide. Just the list that I'm missing. Okay, I just add it. Yeah, for me, that any solution of the consistent problem is the consist of PA provable in PA is related to a key question: how to formulate the consistent of the base system. Different formulations may lead to different answers of the consistent problem. If we view G1 as extensional, then G2 definitely is extensional. Research on G2 after Gödel shows that whether G2 holds depends on many factors, such as the choice of the base theorem, the way to express the consistent statement, the method of arithmetization, the probability predicate we use, and so on. In this work, Professor Artemov makes a new contribution in this line and shows that the consistent problem depends on the way to formulate the consistent statement. Sorry that I previously missed this page. Okay, that's all my some minor comments or minor questions. So maybe yeah, if you can give some replies, and after that we give our time to our faculty, college, and audience for the questions. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I basically agree with almost everything you said. There are a couple of comments, and since the time is really pressing, I'm allowing myself only one comment about the choice of formulation of consistency statement. It is the Hilbert's formulation. We are not inventing the thing. Hilbert gave us a definition of consistency of a formal system. no finite sequence of formulas in a formal system is a proof of a contradiction in this formal system. That's it. And this is a mathematical definition from the beginning. We can argue how to encode it into arithmetic. All right, look, this the Gödel consistency formula, Rosser consistency formula, Montagnier consistency formula, or any other Pfefferman consistency formula, and any other things. This is open for discussion, but this is about translation or formulation of this thing. The original is given. This is a given Hilbert formulation of consistency. I'm not playing with this. I'm starting with it. I'm working with it. And I'm proving something about this particular given definition. And there are no other definitions about this. This is my only, well, the objection, that's the comment which is worthwhile of mentioning here. And otherwise, thank you for a very professional comments. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we first give time to our audience. Yeah, I see someone raise their hand. Oh, first, we just your order. First, Stephen, right? Lucas, Stephen.
Yes, thank you very much. I hope that you hear me. And I only would like to comment my paper, which I have written the reference in chat. And Professor Cheng was asking about, among others, what about the formulation of consistency. So, of course, standard procedure is such that you can define the consistency of the system, of the formal system, by using consequence operations. Yes, so that does not exist belonging to the language of the system, to the set of all well-built formulas, such that this formula and its negation belongs to the set of consequences. So this is the consistency in the traditional sense, and the consistency in the absolute sense or in the post sense is such that the system is consistent in absolute sense or in post sense if the set of the consequences is not equal to the set of all well-built formulas. So they are the standard two definitions of consistency of the system.
Yeah.
Okay. So
We need to
point out that such notions are used in the paper in the chat. So this is only my comment. Many thanks to Professor Artemov for his very interesting talk.
Have a question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, I can hear about 10% of the words you're pronouncing, so I'm not. But thank you for the comment anyway. And I suggest you just, if you have a specific question, I would be more than happy to answer it. But so far, I just couldn't understand, isolate a specific question, the things in what you said. I'm sorry. Because of the sound was extremely poor, extremely. I just don't know what happened to this. And I think I'm not alone with this because it's the problem on your side. Sorry, Stefan.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Sergei, there is an interesting principle involved in these higher order systems that and also with respect to first order logic, and that is if something is provable, then it holds. So if you have provable psi implies psi, and that's something we don't have in these first order logic systems that we do have in the higher order logic systems, and it seems to be a fundamental difference.
Not for you, because I'm not sure.
Yes, this is the systems which are
Once
the usual.
once you have that, if provable of psi implies psi, you immediately have.
No, it kills all the problem, and in certain sense, it kills all discussion, because it means that you're assuming so much that all these questions have trivial answers, and then it means that you're chasing some different set of problems.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that, and I understand the value of rich theories and the rich languages, but logicians are historically interested in doing something with limited means. In particular, the first limitation is I want an exact formalization of things, of logic and all the mathematical language we're using and all the assumptions we're using. And this is itself is a very major limitation, because it's so much easier to wave hands and say, by divine intervention.
I think everybody wants that. They want an exact formalization. They want a model theory.
Yes, and then if it's exact, yes. But then the logician's tradition, Carl,
the interesting thing is the provable of psi implies psi.
Yeah.
And lots of people, the higher order people find that very intuitive and can even formalize it.
Absolutely,
but you can't
yes.
do that in the first order logic.
Yes, and you can go the first order logic, it doesn't work, like say Peano Arithmetic or in any theory like CF. It just doesn't work. So your way is, let's go to higher type theories and let's assume everything we find intuitive, including this particular principle. And then let's hope that all our assumptions, because the problem with big systems is that they turned out to be inconsistent at the end of the day. Let's hope that all our assumptions are still consistent and we can work safely in this thing. This is one approach. My approach is to limit, to go not higher, but to go more constructive. In particular, we reason not with unspecified witnesses, like existential quantifiers in first order normally suggest, but rather with a scoring style presentation. I work with functions, at least in the ways, in the moments where I really need to be precise. And I prefer to work with explicit presentation of the information at hand, in particular with explicit proofs, rather than the probability statements, rather than with extension quantifier of probabilities, rather with modality which represents probability, but actually just hides an extension quantifier inside of it. So my way is to be more constructive. Your way is to go to high order and assume everything which you like and which you believe.
They're in this higher order systems. In other words, it's important that they have model theories. And the consistency doesn't come from the kind of proofs you're giving here. The consistency comes from the existence of a model for these higher order systems.
Absolutely true.
So now the model theory itself, is making use of these higher order notions. And so there is a bit of a circularity there, but there is a model theory. It's not just that you're hoping that the thing is going to be consistent. You have to take.
But then you're hoping that your model theory, is correct. And
that's right.
That's true. But that was the origin of the whole discussion in the beginning of the turning of the beginning of the 20th century. That's how the Hilbert program appeared, because that's after all these counter approaches, when people do freely introduce notions freely and using their intuition to work with them freely, they turned out to be that many things are inconsistent. So I agree, they scared too much, and they decide, let's do finitistic. Let's do only finitistic methods are declared as reliable and trusted, and the rest, Hilbert program, is supposed to be defined and proved by this finitistic method to be consistent. And this is what I accepted with mother's milk, and in particular in this case with Kolmogorow's milk, who was in this case, because he told me, he said that yes, and after all, I think that Hilbert is right. It's okay to use indefinite or abstract elements as soon as you have a proof that they are consistent. And also, it's an empirical observation, though, as soon as your abstract reasoning is formulated a specific result, the specific concrete result is true or solid and applicable. And this is something which is in between this Hilbert, or it's a Hilbert plus, and UCarl, because it gives a room for abstract methods. But the consistency thing is taken quite seriously. And if we do just what we want and using model theory as justification, then we are really losing the ground a little bit in this case. Because of course, the model theory, if you have good intuition, fine. After all, we're just making kids without knowing how on earth it's going on. And life is going on. And in this effect, yes. But yes, I'm finished.
Well, thank you very much for a very nice presentation and a very nice proof of the formal proof.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure and honor to have you.
Selector proof of consistency. Right. And so, right. And so I
that's
think
what we can do with limited tools, yes.
Yeah,
I wish I have your power, Carl.
Computer scientists are very much concerned with formalizing all these very complex systems. And for that, they need these higher order types.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. As computer scientist, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
But this is my philosophical and mathematical observation.
Right. But I don't think anybody, everybody wants consistency. And if you can have the provability of consistency, either the way you're doing it or the way that they are doing it with model theory, that's very important to them.
Absolutely. It adds things, yes.
I think that Dan's had his hand up for a while.
Okay, Dan, I'm not a host here, so I'm just...
Yes, okay. Could I ask a question here? What is the interest of proving the consistency of Peano arithmetic in Peano arithmetic, given that if it's inconsistent, it proves consistency?
Good, good. That's why from the beginning, remember one of the small remarks there, but which says that you cannot prove consistency of Peano arithmetic by proving anything you wish in Peano arithmetic itself. And you're totally right in this. This is the vicious, and this is a loop out of which there is no way out. So my way out is I split this into two things. First, I'm not proving consistency of Peano in Peano. I'm proving consistency of Peano in informal arithmetic, which is, so my trusted core is not Peano. My trusted core is IA, I call it. It's a mathematical theory, not necessarily formalized, which, however, uses the analogs of Peano arithmetic principles, namely recursive definitions of times and plus and induction principle. That's it. And I, as a mathematician, can discipline myself in order to think inside this theory. And this is it's IA. The big question is the correspondence between IA and PA. But IA is my trusted core. My opinion is that IA is stronger than PA because it allows you to do some tricks which are not necessarily formal and then to find its formal incarnation. And like this one with selector proofs, you're free to use the selector proofs if you're living in IA. But AI, the old-fashioned, when it also gives you the proof of single formula, and that's it, is not good enough because inside it, it's good enough in the sense that it encodes everything, but you really have to dig in and find the jewel in the here. Yeah. So my trusted core is IA. In this respect, it's not a vicious circle.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not a vicious circle, but I mean, your confidence in IA is the same sort of confidence of a system within the system. If IA is inconsistent, then you're again going to have.
I agree. And this is if you look at the finite slide, that the only thing which I consider as conceptual implication or conceptual impact of what I'm doing. There are some nice things, like as a mathematician and logician, I like certain things which appear. There are technical things, like selector proofs and other things. However, the conceptual thing is that I'm removing this damn vicious circle, the curse of Gödel, so that the self-consistency is impossible. It is not the case. Proven self-consistency is possible.
But the thing is, what's the interest of proving self-consistency? That's the issue.
This is the issue, yes. But then I will answer you if you have the full success of the real Hilbert program. If you have the finitistic mathematics and you prove the consistency of PA using primitive recursive arithmetic, this would be a good one. Or even if you prove the consistency of ZF using primitive recursive arithmetic, this would be the good one. I agree.
Yes.
But as a first step, people didn't even dare to go there because they say, okay, theory T cannot prove even consistency of itself. How? This is it. This is the end of story. I cannot think about proving finitistic proof of Peano arithmetic because I cannot have even a proof which is formalizable in Peano arithmetic. So I'm removing this curse. I'm removing this scare. I'm letting, okay, it's one roadblock. There may be zillions of ahead. I don't know. But this is one.
Are you saying that
removing
Gensen was wasting his time? You could have had this very simple proof that you've shown us now, but which was known a long time ago.
Except that selector proofs, they never realize that it's a proof, and the selector proof, and it's a formalizable. Nobody claimed that they have a proof which is formalizable in PA. Sorry,
right.
But
Okay.
technically, yes, sure. But presenting, saying that the original Hilbert's definition of consistency is a scheme, rather than the universal formula, where the universal quantification ranges over whatever standard, non-standard elements, if you're looking mathematically or logically. This was the trap which the logicians pulled themselves, probably mostly by von Neumann efforts. Gödel himself didn't thought this way for a while. Yes, and then he kind of yielded, but still, it's a questionable thing. But the von Neumann was a very big proponent of this thing. However, the original definition of Hilbert, the definition by Hilbert of consistency, is a scheme. How to prove the scheme? We don't have a theory. I suggest you the beginning of the theory, which gives you answer and satisfies the mathematicians. If you ask mathematicians whether they like scheme or a formula, they say they don't care because they don't see the difference. They don't see the difference, but give me the proof. And I say, okay, I have the proof of the scheme. Fine. I think it's provable. You say, no, I don't give you the scheme. And then there's some traitor in the logician's score will say, okay, but these guys, they don't know what they're doing. They cannot even prove that the product of polynomials is a polynomial in arithmetic. Do they trust their impossibility argument that there is no proof of consistency? Of course not. So it's the end of logic.
Yeah,
I know mathematicians. I know, trust me, I spent hours talking to Misha Grohl. I talked to other Nobel laureates, and my colleague is Dennis Sullivan recently, and we discussed foundational things. Yeah. And if they feel that logicians are weak as mathematicians, they will lose a complete respect to this,
right,
which is not good. Yeah. So we have to be honest. We have to be cruelly honest to what we're doing. And this is also, I'm not solving the Hilbert program. It's just beginning, right, but I'm removing the roadblock, and I invite others to begin thinking about it seriously. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, Gensen, of course, Gensen actually proved the proposition consistency, consistent of PA, right? Through this amazing argument using ordinals. And so he actually had a mathematical proof. Now, what's happening, what Sergei's doing is we have these schema proofs, these selector proofs, right? And I think that some mathematicians find that philosophically dubious. They want real live proofs of real live propositions. And so their approach, again, has an intuitive basis, as does Sergei's. Their approach is that they do all these complicated things with types and higher order types and recursive types, right? Because they need it for their computer science work. And then they get worried about the consistency. And so we have systems like Lean, okay, which formalize all this. And then you have to worry about the consistency of Lean. But they have a similar approach in that they start off with an intuitive basis and they get some intuition around that, and they do some proofs. And then they go over to the formalization part, and then they worry about the consistency of the formulation of their formalization. But when they do that worrying, they then go to model theory to save them. But the model theory that they have is kind of recursive because it's also based on higher order types and recursive types. So you have an incestuous relationship there. So I think in both cases, in both Sergei's approach and in the higher order computer science approach, you have an incestuous relationship down at the bottom of worrying about proving the consistency in the system itself. It can be an informal system like IA. Can IA, for example, prove its own consistency?
Well, that's a good challenge to epistemologists and to foundationalists.
Yep. Right.
But at least there are very juicy questions, Carl. Trust me. I hope that people will hear the bell and begin thinking.
Yep.
Yes, and then there is such a beautiful math coming from Gensen, all this ordinal analysis. And it's such a beautiful math. And then studying what is improvable, regardless to whether it's a real consistency or just monopoly consistency you're studying, like monopoly money, versus real money. Maybe it's an artificial consistency, but it works as separating languages or separating theories. One is stronger than another, where it can prove its consistency formula. So as a tool in studying proof theory, it's a wonderful contribution. The ConPA, the ConT, the consistency formula, and the Gensen analysis, they're excellent. The Gödel's proof through T, through the consistency proof, is also wonderful because it gave rise to, and we have a pleasure of having Carl here in part because it's a high type theory where Gödel contributed very considerably. Absolutely. So no good math remained. It just is in vain.
Well, thank you very much for this wonderful seminar. I guess it's we're a little bit past time here. So
we have the boss, Young is the boss here.
Okay, so any more questions from the audience? Okay, if no, so in fact, we have run out of time. Okay, first, thank to Professor Sergei Artemov for this very interesting and insightful, wonderful lecture. Also, we thank all the audience attending this lecture, especially I see some foreign and local professors and attend this lecture. So thank you very much. Also, finally, we thank the technical support of the Xue Shuzhi. And that is all. Yes, I think this lecture is very stimulating. So maybe we still have some, question we can still think about, or we can still communicate with the speaker. Okay, that's all for today's lecture. And thanks for all. And see you. And bye-bye. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, been a wonderful interchange.